Hello, everybody, again. I hope you're well. Uh, my name's Georgia Byng, and I'm reading from my book, Molly Moon's incredible book of hypnotism. We've got to chapter 12, and behind me on my left, I've got a picture that I bought in a flea market. I love this picture. It was just at the back of a pile of bits of rubbish, really, and I just thought it was the sort of thing I'd like to look at quite a lot. I do like looking at it, and so here it is for you to look at. Um, Chapter 12, here we go. Everything was going according to plan. Molly and Petula spent the afternoon in a room in the Ville Hotel. And while it was far from being the best hotel in the world, its beds were old and lopsided and its oak furniture was scratched and worn out, it was a good place for Molly to catch her breath, and Petula found the armchair comfortable. Molly instructed Miss Addiston and Edna to wait for her in the minibus, while she started on the next phase of her plan. She picked up the telephone and rang the international operator. "The name's Alabaster. They live in America," Molly explained. "I'm afraid you'll have to be a bit more precise than that," the operator replied. "Which state and what's the town?" "Polchester or Pilchester or Porchester. It's somewhere near New York." "I'm sorry, but this is just too vague," the lady said. "There are thousands of alabasters in the United States. It would take me all night to go through them." "Are you feeling relaxed?" Molly said slowly. "Sorry," said the operator. "Is this some sort of prank? If it is, you can hang up now." "No, thanks for your help," said Molly. She was very disappointed to learn that Molly was going to be a lot more difficult to find than she'd expected. Still, Molly was excited to be in the hotel room. She switched the television on and sat down to count out her prize money. Inside the envelope, the money was in a bundle held together by a flat piece of paper. Molly ripped the paper off and fanned the cash out like a pack of cards. Molly had never held a £10 note and never even seen a £50 note, let alone 60 £50 notes. £3,000. It looked good, smelled good, and felt good. Molly thought that how the money made her feel powerful and free. She could go anywhere in the world with £3,000, Australia, India, or China. She could just buy a ticket and go. Or she could spend it all on sweets, lorryfuls of sweets. Molly didn't want sweets, but there were a few things that she did want. So putting the money into her pocket and her hypnotism book under her anorak, she and Petula went shopping. 10 minutes later, they were walking down Bryersville High Street. Molly was carrying a travelling basket for Petula, which she had bought in Animal Love, the pet shop. Petula was looking proud and perky, with a brand new red collar round her neck. Molly stopped at the optician's and on a whim stepped inside. 5 minutes later she came out again in a pair of dark glasses. She'd always wanted a pair, and now she felt they might also be useful to disguise her. She didn't want people recognising her from the show. And then she continued on round the bend in the road and paused in front of the wooden-framed window of the antique shop, Mouldy Old Gold. The window display was an eccentric collection of interesting bits and pieces: mirrored glass balls, cut glass crystal goblets, silver boxes with secret compartments, a parasol with a parrot handle, magnifying glasses, a corset, a huge ostrich egg, a bowl of wax fruit, a sword, and a pair of Victorian riding boots. And then on a small velvet platform, at the back of the display, a golden disc caught Molly's eye. On its surface was etched a dark spiral which seemed to pull Molly's eye towards it. It was beautiful, and, although Molly's breath had steamed up the window, she was sure she could see that it was on a chain. To Molly it looked exactly like a pendulum should look. Molly took off her sunglasses, pushed open the shop door and stepped inside. An old-fashioned bell rang over the top of the door, alerting the shopkeeper, Mr. Mould, who was at the back polishing a pair of antique spectacles. He briskly licked his fingers, tweaked his bushy eyebrows, and scurried to the front to greet the customer. When he saw a scruffy child with a pug dog, his eagerness faded. Good afternoon, he said, adjusting his collar. Afternoon, said Molly, looking up from a display case full of jewellery and fancy hairpins. Can I help? Asked Mr. Mould. Yes, please. I'd like to have a look at the pendulum from your window display, please. Molly had decided to treat herself. She needed a proper, heavy pendulum, and it would have to be the one that worked. So it would be the perfect present for herself to celebrate her achievements in hypnotism. A pendulum, hummed the shopkeeper. He went to the window and reached inside. Then he brought out a tray and put it on the glass counter between him and Molly. I think there might be a pendulum sort of thing in here. Molly looked inside the drawer. It was full of coloured bead necklaces, chains, lockets and pendants, but the pendulum she'd fancied wasn't there. Ah, the one I'm talking about is the gold one on the velvet at the back of the window, she explained. Coughed Mr. Mould. I'm afraid you... yes, well, that pendant will be beyond what you can afford, young lady. He fetched the antique pendulum on its chain and let Molly admire it as he turned it over in his hand. Close up, it was even better looking than it had seemed before. Its gold was worn, but not dented, and the spiral on it was perfectly etched. How much is it? Well, it's £550. It's solid 22-carat gold and rather old. Perhaps this one would be more suited to your purse. Mr. Mould picked up a pewter necklace with a dull brown stone in it. Molly ignored the pewter piece and studied the gold pendulum. Its spiral seemed to turn as Molly looked at it. She found it irresistible. She had to have it. Molly was sick of not being able to afford things. From now on, she'd buy whatever she wanted. With an extravagant gesture, she reached inside her pocket and pulled out her wad of cash. I'll take the gold pendulum, she said politely, and she counted out 11 £50 notes. Mr. Mould stared. You must have been very lucky at the races. No, I was lucky at the talent competition, Molly explained. Oh, so you're the girl who won. My granddaughter rang me and told me about you. She said you were fabulous. The old man couldn't disguise his amazement. He was astonished that the girl in front of him, as ordinary looking, as ugly even as Molly, could be thought of as cute, gorgeous and lovely, which was how his granddaughter had described her. Let me shake your hand then, he said. Congratulations. He shook Molly's clammy palm. So, you had them all cracking their ribs laughing, he said, half hoping that Molly would do an impersonation for him or tell him a joke. Molly said, smiling enigmatically. So, you're buying yourself a present? The shopkeeper pressed the button on the till, making it open with a ting, and he slipped the £550 into its drawer. Yep. And where did you learn to perform like that? Molly was so happy and excited that she didn't mind telling him. From a very old book, she said, mysteriously tapping the big, heavy shape under her anorak. You're joking. No, I'm not. It's a very special book. Which is why you're carrying about with you, said the shopkeeper. You got it, said Molly. The shopkeeper wrapped Molly's purchase. Thank you. Enjoy your pendant. Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye. As Molly tucked the parcel into her pocket and turned to leave, the bell above the shop door rang, and another customer came in a cloud of cigarello smoke. He bustled past Molly, knocking her slightly. Molly stepped out of the shop, pulling up the collar on her scruffy blue anorak and putting her new dark glasses on again. Mr. Mould gazed after her. The new customer blocked his view. "Let me have another look at the pair of glasses you showed me this morning," he demanded. "Ah, yes, Professor Nachman," said Mr. Mould, shaken from his daze, pulling the spectacles that he'd been polishing earlier out of his top pocket and putting them on the counter. "You'd never guess it, but that girl out there's just won the town talent competition." His impatient, short, fat customer wasn't at all concerned with modern Bryersville life, but he did have an interest in Bryersville life 100 years ago. He'd been into Mould's shop several times since he discovered that the elderly antique dealer knew the story of the town's famous Dr. Logan, and that Mr. Mould had even bought and sold artifacts that had been used in Logan's travelling hypnotism show. Today, Professor Nachman was back in the shop because of the pair of antique spectacles that were on the counter now. They had black lenses with a white swirling pattern on them and were said to have once belonged to Dr. Mesmer himself. "Supposed to be protection against hypnotic eyes," Mr. Mould had explained. "Fun but foolish, but I should think," he added hopefully, "very appropriate for your museum collection." The spectacles were expensive, and Professor Nachman hadn't decided whether to buy them or not. He picked them up and scratched at his oiled moustache with a plump, long-nailed finger. Mr. Mould continued to stare down the high street at Molly and Petula, who were strolling along, looking at shop windows. "Are you absolutely sure you haven't had this book by Dr. Logan pass through?" said Dr. Nachman, "because my museum would pay over the odds for it. Over the odds. For the hypnotism exhibition that I'm organising." No, definitely not," said the shopkeeper, dragging his gaze away from Molly. "Apparently she can dance like Ginger Rogers. My granddaughter thought she was beautiful. She looks quite plain to me. Well, I suppose it's all in the eyes of the beholder." "Yeah, whatever," said the professor, trying the big spectacles on and looking up at the ceiling. "She bought herself a beautiful gold pendant, although she called it a pendulum. A funny thing for a child to buy. I hope she didn't fritter all that prize money away." "A pendulum?" said Professor Nachman, suddenly giving the shopkeeper his full attention. He turned his swirly, spectacle-clad eyes upon him. "How much money did she win?" £3,000, I believe. It's amazing, isn't it? She looks so ordinary. Well, you know what they say. Don't judge your book by its cover. And talking of books, well, when I asked her where she learned to perform like that, she said, from a very special old book. What an eccentric child. "What book?" demanded Nachman, his nose twitching like a dog's that had just picked up a scent. "Oh, some book that she's carrying." Professor Nachman hurriedly took off the antique spectacles and at last looked out into the street at the girl. She was reading the notices outside the newsagent's and, held awkwardly in the crook of her arm under her blue anorak, was the hard-edged shape of a large rectangular object. Nachman was struck so powerfully by the feeling that he'd just struck a bullseye that he gasped. He'd been stalking Bryersville, looking for people carrying his book all weekend, longing for a vision like this. He'd hit the jackpot. He was sure of it. His mind raced as he thought about what Mr. Mould had been saying about her. She'd bought a pendulum, won a whole load of money. Everyone thought that she was gorgeous, but she wasn't, and the secret of her success lay in a special old book. This book she obviously didn't want anyone to see, since she was hiding it under her jacket. Nachman's gut instinct surged up inside him and told him that the shape under the odd-looking girl's anorak was, without any shadow of a doubt, his hypnotism book. Molly and Petula were now disappearing round the corner. The professor lunged for the door handle, then he remembered the spectacles. "I'll take the glasses," he said. "How much did you say they were?" "They're absolutely unique," said Mr. Mould shrewdly. £450. He handed the silver-rimmed spectacles over, Nachman's mind was galloping. He knew the shopkeeper was charging too much and he didn't like it, but if they were really effective anti-hypnotism glasses, he might need them, and he didn't have time to bargain. "I'll take them." Professor Nachman put the money on the desk. "Don't bother wrapping them," he said. "And if you get anything else on hypnotism, call me in the States. Here's my number." "Certainly," said the shopkeeper happily. He'd never sold so much in an afternoon. It had been a good idea to open on a Sunday after all. "Goodbye." Professor Nachman hurried out of the shop, threw his cigarillo on the ground, and looked about frantically, left and right, for the girl. He burst with excitement as he puffed his way down the street in the direction that they had taken. Molly and Petula, meanwhile, had returned to the hotel, where Miss Addiston and Edna were faithfully waiting in the minibus. Molly went to her room, collected her rucksack, and came down to pay her bill for the afternoon's rent. She then went to the minibus and climbed in. Petula hopped in after her. "Where to, miss?" Miss Addiston asked in her rubbly-mouthed voice, still not wearing her false teeth. "The airport," Molly said confidently. She sat back and gave Petula a good stroke. Professor Nachman, who'd been looking for the girl in other shops, bustled into the drive of the hotel just as the blue minibus was pulling out. The driver had a mad look in her eye and seemed to be wearing a pair of knickers on her head. As the vehicle turned into the traffic, Professor Nachman caught a second glimpse of the plain-looking talent contest winner. She was sitting in the back of the minibus like a starlet, with a pug dog beside her and a big burgundy-coloured book on her knee. And through the low window he saw that she was holding what was unmistakably a passport. Professor Nachman knew that girl had the hypnotism book. In a useless effort to get closer to it, he dived for the back of the minibus, but he missed the vehicle completely and he tripped over his feet instead. Getting a mouthful of exhaust, he started to panic. Nachman realised that the hypnotism book, his book, was sliding away from him. The book was essential to his plan, his brilliantly conceived secret plan that was going to catapult him to the top of his profession. Without it, he'd never achieve his aims. Now there was a good chance that the girl with the passport planned to take it far, far away. Desperately, Nachman ran, huffing and puffing, into the hotel. "Order me a cab and get my bill ready," he rudely ordered the receptionist. Then he rushed upstairs, his double chin wobbling. "Shame you're going so soon," the woman said on his return, as he charged towards her with clothes bulging out of his case. Professor Nachman grunted and shoved his credit card at her. He was bristling with nerves. He must keep track of that girl. "So where's the cab?" he demanded fiercely as he signed his bill. You'll find a rank just outside the hotel gate," answered the receptionist, wondering whether the professor was about to have a seizure. "Are you all right, sir?" But Nachman didn't reply. He was already out of the door. "To the airport," he growled at a sleepy taxi driver who was reading the paper. It was a long shot, but he felt sure that was where the girl was headed. As the car moved off, Nachman willed the traffic lights not to turn red. Beads of sweat were dribbling down his forehead. Then, as the taxi made good progress out of town, he realised that he could still catch the girl, and he began to cool down. That book, it was his destiny. All he had to do was follow it. And that is the end of chapter 12. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope to see you again for chapter 13. I like the number 13. Anyway, lucky, I think it is. So I hope you have a lucky evening wherever you are. A happy evening too, and happy hypnotizing wherever you are. Goodbye.